No castle is complete without its brave knights, and who better to brave the knight than a soldier of true character and nobility? Beregond of Gondor was a knight in the 3rd Company of the Citadel Guard in Minas Tirith. He was born late in the 3rd millennium of the Third Age. His forebears were from the mountain vales in the south of Gondor, who themselves were descended from people of Ithilien. Beregond is introduced in the first chapter of Return of the King, Minas Tirith. His character serves a role largely filled by Gandalf in Peter Jackson's movie adaptation. Nonetheless, he offers an insight into how the inhabitants of Minas Tirith viewed the shadow cast over them, and acts not only as a character who advances the plot, but also as a good friend of Peregrin Took. After Pippin had committed himself to the service of Denethor, he was dismissed and left to himself for a while, though with an instruction from Gandalf to check on Shadowfax. The hobbit did not wander in the streets of the Citadel for long before he was approached by a man clad in black and white livery. This was Beregond, come to teach him the lesser passwords of the city, and to answer any questions he may have had. The knight himself was curious about Pippin, having never seen a halfling before, nor had any of the people in the city. Their meeting was quite cordial, and after they went to see Shadowfax, Beregond took the hobbit to the 3rd Company's storehouse, where they requisitioned food and drink to relieve Pippin's hobbit hunger. They went to talk and eat on a battlement overlooking the Pelennor. This battlement was a place in the city that they would visit more than once to converse and reflect, while the shadow of Mordor loomed heavy over Gondor. From here, they observed the carriages and wagons that carried the city's non-combatants to sanctuary in the mountain vales. Concerning this, Beregond said, "Few, maybe, of those now sundered will meet again, and there were always too few children in this city, but now there are none, save some young lads that will not depart, and may find some task to do. My own son is one of them." Through his commentary, we see a personal look at the waning hope in Minas Tirith at that time. Still, waning is not lost, and he retained some hope, if not for the defense of the city, for which he feared, then for the survival of hope itself, and the hidden memory of life as it was before. On the other hand, he also later expressed that there was a feeling of impatience, even impotence, toward the encroaching threat of Mordor, dangerous as it was, but just out of reach. Despite this sentiment, he had much confidence in the military leadership of the Lord Faramir, a trust which he shared with the rest of the Guard, and in fact all of the people of Minas Tirith, for they loved Faramir. He briefly mentioned also the recklessness of Boromir. Beregond was both perceptive and reflective. In one of his conversations with Pippin, he alluded to an inclination among Gondorians to underestimate the danger which faced them. He said, "The doings at Isengard should warn us that we are caught now in a great net and strategy. This is no longer a bickering at the fords, raiding from Ithilien and from Anorian, ambushing and pillaging. This is a great war, long planned, and we are but one piece in it, whatever pride may say." Though their conversations usually turned to the doings of the enemy and the perilous times in which they lived, they also talked about their cultures, the Shire, and Pippin's experiences in Middle-earth. Beregond was especially impressed, even astonished, by all that the halfling had seen and done. When it came time for Beregond to resume his duties within the Citadel, he told Pippin that, if he liked, he could go and look for his son to keep him company. Pippin eventually went down to the lower levels of the city to inquire at a place called the Old Guest House, where he met Bergil, son of Beregond. Their introduction was born out of Bergil's own curiosity when he saw the hobbit, for Pippin was shorter already than the almost 5-foot-tall 10-year-old, and moreover was clearly a stranger in the city. Bergil was a proud child, no doubt due in part to his being the son of a guard of the Citadel, and he displayed some hints of a rivalrous character. This is seen in his comments about Pippin's height especially, though the hobbit shrugged those off with some rough jesting of his own. The situation was diffused when Pippin informed Bergil about his father's suggestion that he be the hobbit's guide and company for a while, which delighted him. He was relieved that Beregond had not changed his mind about sending him away from the city for safety's sake. Bergil became fast friends with Pippin as they walked and talked. In fact, it's said that Beregond's son was the halfling's best companion since he left Merry's side. And we learned from their conversations that Beregond had a brother or brother-in-law named Iarlas, who was as old as Pippin at 29 years, and that Bergil had a grandfather who lived in Lasarnak, the Vale of Flowers, to the south of Minas Tirith. There is also a scene where Bergil said that he wished, almost, that there were no war, so that he and Pippin could visit his grandfather's house. This 10-year-old probably had notions of the excitement of battle, and the nobility that can be found in war, without being painfully aware of the loss and devastations that come with it. Perhaps this was some of that Gondorian pride referenced by Beregond. The two went their separate ways at sundown of that day, and many things would come to pass before they spoke again. Before the siege of Gondor began, Pippin witnessed the respect and brotherly love that Beregond had for his commanding officer, the Lord Faramir. This loyalty was first demonstrated when again the halfling and Beregond sat and talked in an embrasure of the city walls. They heard and then saw the fell beasts and their black riders assailing Faramir and his horsemen as they raced to the gate of the city. Upon seeing their peril, Beregond went bounding down to the lower levels of the city to see if there were any way that he could help. By the time he would have reached them, however, Gandalf had already warded off the ringwraiths and rallied with Faramir. When Pippin saw them entering the Citadel, he caught his first glimpse of the captain up close, and he realized why Beregond held Faramir in such high regard. Faramir's was the face of one who has been assailed by a great fear or anguish, but has mastered it and now is quiet. Here was one with an air of high nobility, such as Aragorn at times revealed, less high perhaps, yet also less incalculable and remote, one of the kings of men born into a later time, but touched with the wisdom and sadness of the elder race. He knew now why Beregond spoke his name with love. He was a captain that men would follow, that he would follow, even under the shadow of the Black Wings. Beregond was next seen when the city was under siege by the armies of Mordor. Grond, the battering ram at the head of the assault, neared the gate. Worse still, a delirious Denethor had given the order for himself and a wounded, unconscious Faramir to be laid on a table intended for a funeral pyre in the mausoleum of the stewards. A frantic Pippin, now released from the service of the steward, met Beregond standing sentinel at the entrance to the Citadel, and pled with him to go and prevent the imminent tragedy. Beregond was conflicted, for neither did he wish to disobey the steward and abandon his post, nor did he want the captain to perish. Beregond made his decision, and went swiftly to the Rath Dinnan, and then to the houses of the dead, until he reached the house of the stewards. In his haste and concern for Faramir, he killed a hostile porter at the Fen Hallen, the door to the Rath Dinnan, and then killed 2 more of Denethor's servants while they tried to carry out their master's orders at the house of the stewards. Pippin and Gandalf arrived in time to find Denethor wrest the door to the house away from Beregond, only for Gandalf to race up the steps and disarm the sword-wielding steward. All 3 who had not been turned to madness rushed inside to find Faramir, feverish and senseless but unharmed atop a table furnished with wood. Gandalf carried him to relative safety, sitting him on the bier which had carried him to the houses of the dead. Beregond witnessed a bitter exchange between the wizard and the steward, and when the latter made one last misguided attempt to save his son, with a knife, from what he believed was inevitable doom at the hand of the Dark Lord, Beregond leapt to the captain's defense. Denethor was dismayed at this, and further blamed Gandalf for stealing the loyalties of his people. The knight also saw the stewards crazed to suicide by burning. At this, Gandalf said, "Ill deeds have been done here, but let now all enmity that lies between you be put away, for it was contrived by the enemy and works his will. You have been caught in a net of warring duties that you did not weave. But think, you servants of the Lord, that but for the treason of Beregond, Faramir, captain of the White Tower, would now also be burned." Beregond and Gandalf then took the Lord Faramir to the houses of healing. On their way, the knight saw the porter that he had killed, and lamented that he was forced to take such action. Beregond still had the key to the Fen Hallen, which Gandalf told him to keep until the battle had concluded. He also advised him to inform the chief of the guard about all that had just happened, which would mean Beregond's removal from the guard. Lastly, the wizard sent his recommendation that he be assigned as Faramir's personal guard and servant in the Houses of Healing, and this he was granted. Beregond, along with Bergil, who was running errands for the city's healers, would be there to witness the healing of Faramir by the true king, Aragorn. In fact, Bergil was the one who brought the King's Foil, an herb which Aragorn used to resuscitate Faramir. When the captains of the West combined forces marched northward to the Morannon, the Black Gate, Beregond was sent with them, as he could not rejoin the guard of the Citadel until his actions in abandoning his post and slaying 3 of the steward's servants had been judged. Bergil stayed in the city and kept Meriadoc Brandybuck company while they watched their friends and family depart for the final confrontation. Beregond's place among the host was in the front ranks, for he was given his own company to lead. When the armies of Mordor broke forth upon them at the Black Gate, he stood and fought beside Pippin, the Prince Imrahil, and his men of Dol Amroth, and chosen men of Minas Tirith, with the Rohirrim behind them. The first of Mordor's creatures to join battle with the men of the West were formidable Olog Hai, and one of their chieftains attacked Beregond, presumably with a warhammer, and knocked him down to the ground, stunning him. The knight would have had his throat ripped out, were it not for Pippin, who drove his Númenórean sword up into the troll's vitals, killing it. The Olog's corpse, however, pinned Pippin, and possibly Beregond, beneath its weight for the remainder of the battle. When the ring was destroyed, Sauron was permanently diminished, the Towers of the Teeth utterly collapsed, and the armies of Mordor quavered, fled, and died. Following this, we can assume that Pippin and possibly Beregond were recovered from beneath the body of the troll chief. When next we see Beregond, it is before the newly crowned King Elasar, Aragorn. He is to have his case judged, along with many others who were there to receive judgment, honor, and decoration. I think it's best if you read and hear for yourself of the fate of Beregond. And the king said to Beregond, Beregond, by your sword, blood was spilled in the Hallows, where that is forbidden. Also, you left your post without leave of lord or of captain. For these things of old, death was the penalty. Now therefore I must pronounce your doom. All penalty is remitted for your valor in battle, and still more because all that you did was for the love of the Lord Faramir. Nonetheless, you must leave the guard of the Citadel, and you must go forth from the city of Minas Tirith. Then the blood left Beregond's face, and he was stricken to the heart and bowed his head. But the king said, So it must be, for you are appointed to the White Company, the guard of Faramir, Prince of Ithilien, and you shall be its captain and dwell in Emin Arnon in honor and peace, and in the service of him for whom you risked all, to save him from death. And then Beregond, perceiving the mercy and justice of the king, was glad, and kneeling kissed his hand, and departed in joy and content. And Aragorn gave to Faramir Ithilien to be his princedom, and bade him dwell in the hills of Emin Arnon within sight of the city. With his character and history established, I hope you will agree that, though Beregond and Bergil was excluded from the movie adaptation, he is memorable nonetheless among the cast of Return of the King, and he stands out to me particularly for his perseverance through the dark times when his world threatened to crumble all around him. But then, that is the hero, isn't it? And the resolution of his story seems very much like an echo of Tolkien's own Christian values. It's a good example of the underlying themes in The Lord of the Rings. One final thought, something interesting about Beregond, his self-professed love of horses, touched on when he and Pippin go to visit Shadowfax. The knight shares this affection with the author. I hope that you have enjoyed listening to my first lore video on a specific character from The Lord of the Rings. Beregond is one of the more unknown figures in Tolkien's works, and one that I have been wanting to discuss for some time. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more lore and gameplay videos. If there's a character or a piece of lore in the Lord of the Rings Legendarium or the Halo franchise that you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments down below. Until we meet again.